Welcome to the SOULFAM podcast. I'm Diana Marquetta, and on this week's episode, I am very pleased to introduce you once again to Seph of Talk to My Angels. Seph and I have known each other several years. I just recently took a magnificent course with him called Manifesting with the Angels. I was not really intending to take this course, and something really sort of drove me to do it, or it called to me in this early 2025 when this beginning of the year has kind of seemed a bit of shambles. So I have had the pleasure of working with him the last few weeks in this fantastic course and have asked him to once again come back to the SOULFAM podcast to share his messages, his grace, and his beautiful sense of ease in working with the angels.
Thank you for having me. And I really appreciate that we have this opportunity to do this. I'm so grateful that we have an avenue in which we can reach people, because when we have this conversation, and this isn't about me, this is about the person who's listening. And that's the person I want to talk to today for sure. And I love having the opportunity to talk to you, whoever it is that is listening right now. I love the opportunity to share whatever it is that I can share with you that actually takes your experience to the next level on a quantum perspective. And so thank you for having me, and thank you for creating such a beautiful platform to reach others.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It feels like this is an important time on the evolution of the planet and of us as humans and as souls. Your work with the angels is really magnificent in a lot of ways. I've known you for several years. Your work itself has evolved as you have evolved. And if you could share, I mean, you're sort of almost beyond channeling and doing readings now. You still do that, I know that, but sort of the energetics of your work has taken on a new level of power.
Thank you. And more importantly, the world is evolved. And I think that statement needs to be underlined, because we may take various aspects of what we see going on the outside, such as the fires in LA and the political unrest and anything that's happening, and any different perspectives about all of the different global crises that humanity faces right now as part of its portal to greatness. The world itself has evolved. And what I mean by that is, when the angels first started communicating with me over 20 years ago, they were talking about these changes in us as we become greater at accessing a power that we have within us to create our reality. And also we would find ourselves creating a different reality that we would live in, which is often referred to as the new earth, the old earth, tastes great, less filling earth, whatever you want to call it, right? And there is this creation of something greater, and we have notably stepped into that greater, so much so that we could even have this conversation and that someone would listen to this, because I know that at various intervals throughout my journey, as I've shared with others the vision that the angels have given me about the transition and transformation into New Earth, people are like, yeah, that'll never happen in my lifetime. And guess what? As Daffy Duck would say, I know, not Daffy Duck, I don't know who I just got in my head, but a cartoon character is like, that's all, folks,
Right.
this is
Bugs Bunny.
this is where we are. And we're doing this, and we're doing this together. And you mentioned the evolution, and practitioners, or those who have agreed to be on this planet at this time, to be ushers into the new era of consciousness, we're also calibrating with it at the same time. And for those who are listening to this show that can relate to a sense of isolation by not having a feeling of community, of being with your peeps, because you understand things that don't come up in mainstream or quote unquote normal conversations. And yet you understand these things at a whole different level, and would like others to embrace a level strictly because it's more empowering for them. Right? I mean, even when I think about being a kid, and I remember, I don't know, I was like 6 or 7 years old, and we drive into the gas station and I asked my mom why we pay for gas. Doesn't it come from the earth? Doesn't it belong to all of us? I mean, at the time, I think it was 67 cents a gallon, just to let you know my age. But I questioned what gave someone the right to own that oil. If it was something that humanity needed, then it belonged to the rest of us. And you can visit everything else that's used to exploit humanity with that paradigm and ask yourself the question, why is this set up in such a way that costs so much money or that costs money or anything like that? And what I mean by bringing that up is that we actually came into this lifetime to discover that we're a conscious creator and that we're not dependent on this system of exploitation, this wheel that's constantly moving, this treadmill that we constantly find ourselves working really hard to get nowhere on, right?
Working hard to get nowhere. Yes, it feels like
Exactly.
that.
Yeah. And it becomes even more so now, and not just because, let's say, things are more expensive, or even when we are working on creating our new businesses, our entrepreneurial nature, or our healing, we feel a sense of stagnancy and waiting and powerlessness. We feel that, we experience that.
Mm-hmm.
And in a certain way, we blame it on the system that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly it's responsible for that. But the
Mm-hmm.
only reason why there's such a gridlock of energy is because, poof, it's time for that to go. And in exchange for which, we're rapidly discovering the power that we have to create reality without it. And because we're creator beings. And that's the most important thing. And as you mentioned, being drawn to the course that I was intuitively guided to offer, one of the things that I was asked to mention when I start offering a way of understanding the angels and the divine realm in calibrating us for manifestation, it is our divine, not just our divine birthright, but it's actually the key to our purpose to be here.
Mm-hmm.
So manifestation isn't just about getting shiny things. Manifestation is a key to remembering that the multidimensional being inside is so powerful that it can create whatever it wants. And if there is one thing that we are here in this body for, it is to remember that. And manifestation is the key to calibrating with that level of awareness.
So let's take that back a notch, because I
Mm,
feel like we see a lot about manifestation in the spiritual community on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. So is manifesting actually about recognizing the creator in ourselves?
bingo. Yep. And the capacity that it has to create. And I know that I'm repeating one of my favorite analogies that the angels gave me years ago. But the divine creator did not go to Goldman Sachs eons and eons ago and go into a board meeting and say, hey, I'm thinking about creating a giraffe. Can I borrow 100,000 or 100 million trillion dollars today, or pounds or euros or yens or whatever? The divine creator used its imagination and its frequency of unconditional love, and most critically, imagined something that didn't already exist, knowing that with its imagination and the power that it has to create what doesn't already exist, that alone crystallizes everything, like our beautiful giraffe, into being. Our waterfalls, our planet, everything was crystallized into being for that. And it kind of makes what we attempt to create within this system look kind of dull and boring compared
Mm-hmm.
to like Mount Everest and
Mm-hmm.
waterfalls and the whole ecological system
Mm-hmm.
and the dolphins and the giraffes and the monkeys and everything else, all these beautiful creatures and this beautiful world that we live in. And all of that was created with energy of imagination and light at a high frequency. And the angels reveal that that's who we are inside.
Mm-hmm.
It's been cleverly hidden from us. And I don't mean that in a conspiracy theory kind of a way, but the constructs that we've lived with in this world are intent on and do have a stake in ensuring that we don't discover our creative capacity. Because when we do, they will vanish, which is the process that we're in right now.
Mhm.
And it isn't really about the external world being extinguished in the form that we know it from this. It's about the actual discovery. The angels remind me every day that this is a movement of consciousness that we're experiencing right now, and that we see that is chaotic and destabilized in the external world is a byproduct of the real event that is happening, which is a conscious event. So the conscious event isn't necessarily the result of the destabilization of the physicalized world. The physicalized world is destabilized because of the conscious event. I had to remind someone yesterday that if they took their focus off of being upset over that is rapidly changing and being destabilized
Mhm.
and put it into creating something that they really want to create, that they would actually contribute more to the positive change that they want to see by doing that and serving others with their gifts and talents than they would by actually using resistance to push against what they don't want to see changed or moved or done with, anger, which is just sort of like pouring your energy into a vacuum.
Yes, I can say I felt a little anger in the last month or two just at obviously things that are dissolving around me literally, and who's responsible for that. However, as you say, I feel like it's probably difficult for some of us to understand that what we're seeing in the physical is a result of the consciousness shift. It feels
Mm-hmm.
just the opposite because we're used to looking at things from the outside in instead of the inside out. And in a way, and this will not sound right to many of us, even myself, that there has to be some sense of gratefulness about all of that is shifting because it will lead us to a kinder, more nurturing, more giving sort of world where perhaps everything's not free, but perhaps there is a proper exchange for what exists.
Yeah. And that's where manifesting comes in, because we will create a lot differently
Mhm.
than we are used to. And I'd like to draw a comparison between the difference of the way that we create. So when I feel compelled to create something, maybe it's the retreat that I'm offering in Hawaii or something of that nature, maybe I'm meant to travel somewhere or whatever it is, I'll just know that it's coming. And in some cases,
Mm.
that might manifest through frequent flyer miles. It might manifest because I end up doing something and naturally and through the flow, money or other resources flow to me, which is one level of creativity. Another level of creativity is I go into an office and I have to sit under these toxic lighting
Mhm.
situations and be in this cage. And then at the end of every 2 weeks, I get this fake money put into my fake bank account, and which isn't
Mhm.
backed by anything. And
Mhm.
then I'm supposed to exchange it for what I need. Well, we're watching that system, and what we have to do to earn enough of those fake credits to actually pay for what we actually need, that gap is getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Mhm.
And this isn't necessarily to pour energy on the problem as much as it is to really create awareness around the lack of true energy exchange in the system that we've
Mm.
understood to be real. Because, like I asked my friend yesterday, do you pay the same amount for everything? That's rent, eggs, gas, and all the other stuff that you did before. That means that whatever it is that you have, it isn't an absolute. It means that it is something that has that has a distortion in it, and the distortion in it is what's affecting our ability to work with it as a tool for creativity. And interestingly enough, when we start getting into the realm of understanding that we are a conscious creator inside, yes, and in some cases we will use money as a tool to do that, but it will come with ease and it will come in the right amounts. And that would be a welcome message for people who feel like they're struggling in the difference between watching this distortion really exaggerate more and more the difference between our capacity to bring it in and the requirement of what it takes to put it out, to output, to get what we need and want. And we're not here just to feed the body and go through the motions. We're here to travel. We're here to speak to each other. We're here to have rich experiences in every way. We're here to do things that expand us on every level. And we're not meant to be just restricted to our homes in front of a screen and just making sure that there's enough nourishing food in our body. We're actually meant for something much greater. Otherwise, not all of this would be here, which is why when we bring this in here, and you mentioned the evolvement of the brand, now people are actually willing to hear, as they say, do you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear? You know, we can talk about something before people are ready to hear about it, or reveal something before people are ready to see it. But when they're ready to see and hear, we have an audience that's ready for something different. And so throughout the years, as one who connects with the angels and calibrates others to connect with them, because I believe you've taken the course that I offer about angel communication as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also done one-on-one sessions to bring in that guidance from the angels. And all of that guidance was always about empowering us to create our reality. And even the hypnotherapy piece, which is my favorite, we get to visit quantum realms. And in that, we get to actually create magical shifts. And that helped me to realize that the real purpose that I've been creating this calibration or co-creating this calibration with the relationship I have with the angels is to empower people for these times to be able to tap into that level inside of us that we have to create reality and therefore circumvent the system, which means we're circumventing the difficulty of it. And I'm amazed daily about and grateful for the absence of anguish that I experience about creating the resources that are needed to get through the day to day.
Now, tell me, is that because you've surrendered to it or because you feel like you have mastered sort of the energetic frequency necessary for that?
A little bit of both and more.
Okay.
And so there is a part of it that is surrender. And one of the things, as you recall, that comes up in the class that you just took, it's the whole idea that there are two levels of us. There is our human level and there is our higher self level. And then when we actually accept that the level that does the more robust and magical way of creating is our higher self, then we learn how potent it is to take our human self and just get out of its effing way, right? Because we're the ones who get in the way of the part of us that creates. And the part of us that co-creates is awareness. The part of us that creates the open doors that we didn't expect, the unexpected resources or money that we didn't see coming in to facilitate something for happening. It isn't our human self or our ego that even has remotely the capacity to do that. It is our higher self that does it. And sometimes all we have to do through surrendering is just get out of its way. But to be fair, we are, let's say, programmed into a different system where we weren't taught that. We don't automatically know that. And more aptly put, we were taught not to trust that.
Right. Exactly.
We were actually taught distrust in the ability of our higher self. So there is a little bit of an integration period that we have to go through. And to a certain degree, we have to develop a trust relationship with that co-creative power. And that means that it's potent when we actually do see something manifest. And it gives us leverage to go, wait a minute, this does work. And then we give it more trust and it opens up even more. We give it more trust and it opens up even more. And so the universe, the powers that be, that created us isn't like, oh, you bad children of mine, why are you not getting it and just trusting me right now? That same intelligence is like, I'm going to walk you through this journey of integrating that and leaving the false world behind and embracing who you really are. And so it is a bit of a journey.
So that being said,
Mm.
there is this exterior, of course, to a degree, we still want to believe that God is outside of us. And my sense is that the higher self is God, and I am my higher self.
Yep.
And so when I relinquish my control or whatever it is, my anxiety or my resistance to my higher self,
Mm-hmm.
then lots of magic occurs.
Lots of magic, lots and lots of magic. And I mean, in our everyday world, we think we've got it covered, first of all. And at some point, we actually kind of did a little bit easier, when the gap was a little bit shorter in between what we could do in the external sense and what that would give us in the external sense. It was a lot easier before, but it's not as easy as it once was. And all of that is really coordinated to an agreement that we have at this time to shed the false beliefs, such as the one that says that God or the Creator is outside of me and I am separate. I'm a sinner.
Right. I'm a sinner.
My favorite programming mechanism to allow people or force them to believe that they're not only separate, but they're not worthy of that they are the host of, which is their higher self, which is that divine force.
So I can hear this argument kind of happening between myself and my higher self saying, what do you mean I'm not worthy? I'm not worthy of you. My higher self is like, really? I'm not worthy of you? There's this like disconnect between the two about who's worthy or accepting one another. Does that make sense? Is that a common sort of argument that we tend to have with ourselves?
It is. And yet I'm also told by the angels that we signed up for this internal conflict.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay, why?
Yes.
Why would we do that to
Boy,
ourselves?
yeah, we thought it'd be a blast, and isn't it a blast, right?
Yeah.
But yes, well, actually, in the larger sense, that higher being that we are, existing in a non-dual reality, without the contrast to really see what it is or what we are, needed duality as a form of mirror to see the difference between the two. And so in order to get it and get it good, it said, hey, let's go to this. First of all, the world that we live in, we created it in its form. At the higher level, before we decided to play this game, we said, hey, you know what? And I think we must have started drinking something in the end to the middle part of this, because we were like, hey, let's throw this in. Let's throw COVID in there. That'll be fun. Let's see what we learn from that. And first of all, I don't mean to minimize anyone who's affected by that, but that is a very, very globally challenging situation, no matter how you view it or no matter what your experience is. And yet it's interesting, we actually, as whole and complete beings, as we were creating this reality ecosystem that we would step into, we said, yeah, I agree to do that. What we were thinking, well, that's something we'll discover at the other end of this experience. And a lot of what I get as far as angelic intel about what that is, sometimes people have the ears to hear it and sometimes they don't. So I'm really cautious and careful about how I say that. But the best way I can put it is, when you wake up from a dream and you realize that the dream never happened, and then you say, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for this, right? And then somehow or another, the dream that never happened gives you some sort of insight in your daily life. And sometimes that will happen here while we're still here, but there's a great big heap and teaspoon of it, tablespoon, actually probably cupful of it when we're done here, when we're done in the body, where we wake up from all of the things that we didn't want to happen and we go, oh, wow, now I get it. And some of it, it's not going to make sense to us until we're there. But the angels keep using the analogy of like when we have a dream. I mean, I've had dreams where I lost touch with someone that's important to me. And then I would wake up and realize it was just a dream. And be very grateful for that connection that I might have taken for granted before. There's so many different things that we can have dreams of, and then we wake up from a dream, and then we just get to that point where we realize, oh my gosh, that never happened, and I'm so relieved. And the world that we live in, or the reality that we think we live in, is actually just like that dream, because at a certain space, we do wake up from this and realize that it never happened at all. We're in it now. It's very real and very solid to us, but we do wake up eventually and realize it was just a dream of the soul.
Right. So I get that. So are we living in an illusionary sort of existence so that we can experience this? And I'm not quite sure what it is. That we are awfully strong beings to put ourselves through all of this.
Yeah.
So is this an illusionary existence, and our higher selves are the actual sort of existence?
Yes. Yes. And it also makes sense to find out how we can find the value proposition in this now, not just at the end of this.
Sure.
And there are wonderful ways to do that. And one of the ways is manifesting
Hmm.
magic.
Hmm.
Because magic to me is always an inkling that even though we're in what we could call a false world or an illusionary world, we're still always connected through an energetic connection. And it's funny, I'll use as an example, this is a simple one, and this one comes up a lot whenever I speak on podcasts, but this one just happened yesterday. Same thing, same theme. I'm in the middle of creating and enrolling a beautiful manifestation activation retreat in Hawaii. And I haven't built a website for it. I haven't done anything like that. And 8 of the 12 slots are already taken because the people who are meant to be in it have already somehow or another magically found me, heard about it, and said, sign me up. Some of them even booked their airline tickets and then how do I get signed up now? And I was reflecting on that and the magic that was around it yesterday. And I'm, of course, in Southern California like you.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked over to Trader Joe's to get some of those prized eggs that are so prized
Right.
here in California.
Crazy.
Yeah. I walked across, because Trader Joe's is right across the street from me. I
Mm-hmm.
walk across there, and just then I was getting a text from someone that said, I'm thinking about this retreat and I keep seeing Hawaii license plates. And as I'm reading that text, I look up and what do I see? A Hawaii license plate right there at Trader Joe's, which is a reminder of the fabrication of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Because it isn't that I just happened to see that license plate when it was already in my energy field. It just goes to show you how the external that I'm experience is created by me or that
Mm-hmm.
higher me.
Right.
And what we do in these manifestation calibrations, such as the class or it's funny because we call them workshops, but I call them
Mm-hmm.
calibrations
Mm-hmm.
because it's an energetic download that occurs in these workshops.
For sure.
It's not learning like we learned algebra, which I still haven't used. But of a friend driving to San Diego and one driving to LA, which one's going to get the furthest the fastest? The one that's not on the 405.
Right. Exactly.
So the idea that the external thing that I saw, what isn't really there to begin with until I projected it into being, just to have a little fun and say, yep, you're on the right path by creating this magical retreat.
So we'll break that down a little further, because so much of this has been, a lot of manifestation has been about the mind, the mind, the mind. And I feel like we're past that at this point, or that we can be past that at this point. There's nothing wrong with some of those classes or some of the folks who really work on the mind. But my sense is we actually, as beings, as our higher selves, as our energetic selves, are beyond that. And we actually can move even faster if we sort of engage with ourselves in a different way.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, the evolution of having what I call a group discussion about tapping into it. So, what would have manifested then as some of the prior teachers, it's kind of like going up a ladder and going into some new areas. But one of the things that has occurred with all of this is that there's been a ton of great discovery, which we have the gratitude for, because the minute someone introduced me to conscious creation, I just knew that it was true. And there's some of the techniques, I guess you could say, that were presented that I was like, no, not so much.
Right.
And because we only have the context of the mind, then a lot of it was based on the mind. And that's where some of it didn't really have this huge success rate that we would have expected it to have at the end of the day, is because it, as you would be saying, wasn't tapping into the right hemisphere. So as a hypnotherapist, I understand that we have two hemispheres of mind. One is the left brain, and that's the ego or the human's domain. And the other is the right brain, and that is the higher self's domain. And we operate at our optimum self when we have unified these hemispheres so that our higher self is in unity with our human self as an extension of creativity. And so any of that employed or engaged left brain was always a reflection back to ego or the human self. And then we would end up, as you say, discovering the limits of the capacity of creation at that level. It was great because it invited us into the conversation that we consciously create and asked us to explore more. And for some, the minute that they would hit the limitations, it would actually cap them out of the belief in conscious creation and maybe would send them backward for a little bit. But for some, we may have looked at that as like, okay, I've reached a limitation or a capacity in which this could work, and I'm going to discover and go beyond. And so we're talking about what we would refer to as techniques has now gone all the way to understand calibration, energy, and frequency. And the energy and frequency is really a call to that person that's inside of us all the time. And then when we call to that being inside of us, then we're able to get out of its way as it wants to create a miracle for us.
I think our sense is that our humanity is what leads, but it is not actually, and I mean this in the sense as our humanness or as a human being, but what can actually lead us is our higher selves, our soul, our that, rather than, because I used to think of sort of from here to there, but it's really there to here, or let's all engage at once, all of myself. Am I getting that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is about actually understanding and trusting. And that's why, for example, when we talk about the resource of money, we understand that money is not external, but that when it shows up, it's a reflection of the belief in the abundance inside. And that's why those of us who have an abundance mindset, but the mindset, we've used mind, we've used the wrong word because it's heart, knowing, or awareness. And I'll actually invite those listening to a simple trick in which you really actually tap into that higher part of yourself. Instead of using the word thought or idea, start using the awareness and understand that there are two layers of what we're viewing from within. And there's a distinction which is which, because one has limited capacity and the other one has infinite capacity. So if you're in the shower and you're in that beautiful, expansive state and relaxed, and suddenly you get a book title in your awareness, what we would say our mind, when we shift and use the word awareness, we immediately recognize that the source of what we're viewing from within came from the higher source. So when something is being viewed from within, we have the opportunity to review, where is this being sourced from? What's your source, right? And we get to say, what is this source? So if it's a thought that says, I'm worried about how I'm going to do this, then we already know that that is something inside that's sourced from the left brain our human
Oh.
intellect or our limitations. But if we're hearing an idea like, you can or imagine yourself doing this, and you haven't figured out how, and you'll be breaking current limitations to get there,
Mm-hmm.
that's coming from the source of that information is coming from awareness. So it's not a thought, awareness. And when we start dividing from within what we're viewing or seeing or knowing, as whether that was sourced from our awareness or our higher self,
Mm-hmm.
or sourced from our lower awareness, I call it the lower intellect, then if we actually see the source of that, and we know what it is because it will have a distinct energy signature. One makes us feel great and the other one doesn't. And everyone is so afraid that they might see something incredible for themselves that will never happen. And I say, stop doing that, because the minute that you doubt it, you've canceled it, or you will eventually
Uh,
chisel away at it and cancel it. And it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Prophecy. Yes.
But when something comes in through awareness that is very shiny and it seems to defy our current capacity to do something, it just means that our capacity will be increased to match it. And that's what this journey
Mm.
is a journey of expansion. What comes from expansion? Greater capacity. Take people who are aware, awake, spiritual, conscious, whatever word you want to use to describe someone who said, hey, I'm not going to participate in this other stuff anymore. I'm going to see what I'm capable of inside and connect with the higher realms. All of us who are in that camp, right? How many of us do you know that have multiple callings, feel drawn to be in multiple places all the time, and all of this multiplicity starts showing up? And then our human is like, well, which one should it be? Should it be this one or that one? No, it's supposed to be all of it, because
Mm-hmm.
you've discovered your higher self, which is, of course, the God within. And isn't God everywhere all the time? So if you, in your human capacity, have discovered that your awareness is the divine creator who already is everywhere at all the time, could it make perfect sense that it's okay to have a home in Sedona, one in Tuscany, and one on the Big Island?
Sounds great. Sounds
Yeah,
great
I
to
mean,
me.
but you become you have the capacity to create that,
Mm.
because you've identified with the part of you that absolutely can create that, and you know that it absolutely can because everything around you was created by that. And the angels ask us to do this sometime. Admire one of the things that you know of in the world. Like, I love the ocean. I
Mm-hmm.
love waterfalls.
Mm-hmm.
I love beautiful natural scenery.
Mm-hmm.
And a good example, Iceland is also beautiful, and you have the volcanoes. So you can take something like that and just say, I created that.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it's not blasphemous, because the part of you and me that created that really did create that. So does it have the power to come up with a few $100 for rent at the end of the month? I mean, it already created Mount Everest and, the Galapagos, right? So
Mm.
we already created that before we came here. So if we have the capacity to create that, which we did, and the trees and the leaves and all of that, the animals, we already created that before we came here. And that's the capacity that we have to create. And so if your business that you're starting or the perfect health that you want to create, don't ever think that it's out of range of the
Right.
capacity that you had, because you've already created so much bigger to be here.
I think as our human selves, we have a tendency to categorize and list and keep things separate when in actuality, if we sort of embraced it all and allowed ourselves to feel that sense of creation and awareness, we would expand exponentially.
Mm-hmm. And there's so many things that we can do with that on a practical basis. And that's where this becomes helpful, because
Mm-hmm.
certainly there is seeing the big picture, which seems way too ethereal to grasp. But when we can connect some of the dots at that level and then come back into our body. I'll share with you a practical experience that happened recently because, as you know, Diana, I was helping a friend of mine. I love dogs and rescuing dogs. We rescued this beautiful dog and some puppies and beautiful creatures. And the mother dog, she was emaciated and she was looking for a very special home, someone who didn't want perfection to show up, but someone who wanted an opportunity to be the transformation for this creature. And I went to my friend's house on Friday and I said, let's make a video. And that way we have a video of her. So she sat in the chair and almost on cue, the dog's name is Cindy. Cindy started she's so loving, this dog. She just started licking her and just wagging her tail. And that's the way that she is. She was happy. She did this cute little yawn. It's adorable when dogs do that yawn, right? And their tongue comes out. They're just being them. And she was a perfect little actress and she got her role right on. And I captured the essence of who she is as she interacted with my friend. And I said, let's send these videos out or have them available and let's see what that creates. And of course, there's this tendency well, I hope it works. That's the first thing that we think of when we come up with a good idea. Well, I hope it works because we have this sort of attachment or expectation that there's a result. And when that thought came into my head, I hope this creates a result, I went, no, wait, I am magical. And I know this because so many magical miracles continue to show up in my life. I know that I'm magical. And I don't need proof of that because if this video does what I intend it to do, as whether it would be magical or not, I already know that I'm magical. And I don't need to go forward with this doubting that I am magical. And I am is an affirmation that invites your divine self to affirm. And there's nothing more powerful than saying, I am magical, I am miracles, I am love. And so I had this video, and for only a day, and someone called me on a completely different matter and had another person on the phone with her. And somehow or another, the conversation ventured into how are the puppies?
Oh.
And I said, well, guess what? I actually have a video of Mama Dog. Why don't I send it to you? And the woman that was the other half of the conversation just adopted the dog.
No way. Oh,
Yes.
so
So
beautiful.
I get proof that I am magical. And this beautiful dog has found someone who will love her and is so excited because she's been starting to gain weight and be healthy and also feel secure in a home space and feel like they should. But somehow or another, I got to play a role in these people. And it wasn't me, the ego, that did it. It's the part of me that's magical, but that part of me is united in you. So if you ask me, am I magical? I'm going to tell you yes, because the part in me that created a catalyst for this unity of this beautiful dog in its new home is the part of you that is one with me. And I can tell you and guarantee you that you are magical.
I want to back up to the words I am. And I've recently come to understand that it's potentially the creator. It is our instant connection with your creator. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know where that came from. Maybe it came from your class. I'm not sure.
It's out there.
It's out there. So that's why saying I am. There's another thing about this too, I'll get to. But the words I am immediately connect us with the creator, which is also ourselves.
Right.
Okay.
Well, what do we always say is the internal question, who am I? And then the I am is awareness. Well, what is awareness? It is the divine creator, right? So the ultimate question in this world is, who am I? And that is because there is something that constantly reminds us, which is a higher knowing, that we're not the meat suits, that we're something else. So the I am refers to my awareness. And awareness is sort of like, I think it's Malpighi that says, I think, therefore I am. Regarding the idea, we take for granted that we are aware, that we are here, that we are literally aware. Well, that awareness is our higher self. And so I am takes us straight to awareness. And awareness is the unity with the source, the creator source.
So this was not a question I was planning on asking you in particular, but because I think there's an encouragement to say things out loud. I'm curious what the angels say about, perhaps I say, I am the creator, I am magic. Is there an intonation in my speech or in my vocalization of that also creates a frequency connection with the creator?
So yes, but it's not required.
Okay.
Does it empower it? Yes. Does it actually bring it from the internal world into what we perceive as the external world? It's like a transfer. So as you know, the class that we took, that we facilitated and calibrated with, that was guided, was all about manifesting, but we used a document called the manifesto.
Right.
And the manifesto was just to transfer our desires and our creation onto a piece of paper as a written document so that it was transferred into this realm or into this reality. And so, yes, there is a certain amount of allowing that transfer to take place that actually makes it real. And this is one of the things that I do that's really a powerful creation. So let's say you want to take a trip somewhere. Go buy the tickets, right? Maybe you want to go somewhere in July. Maybe you want to go to the United Kingdom. Maybe you want to go to Bali or somewhere. Just go buy the tickets, because what will happen once you actually plant something that will expand from there, then the next thing that happens is that the next pieces of it will come in whatever way. I've actually bought tickets to somewhere, and then right after I did, someone would call me and say, hey, I'm going to be out of town. Can you watch my house? I was like, I'm definitely supposed to be there. Or did I create that? So we're often hesitant to do the first thing or make our first commitment because we don't know if it's going to happen or not, but we're the ones that have the power to make it happen. So if we feel very drawn to do something, if I want to go somewhere, maybe a couple months from now, you can do something like this on the spur. You can do it on the spur of the moment, actually, because I did a day trip when I came through years ago, before I knew anything about this. I took a day trip where I got the idea in my awareness when I was in my 20s. And in order to come back, I made a connection through Las Vegas, and I won the airfare back. So I took a day trip to Phoenix from LA because I wanted to see the cactus. I'd never been to Arizona before, and I was curious about it. So I thought, I don't have nothing to do. Why don't I go to the airport and go to Phoenix? Well, in order to get there the whole day, I had to take a late night connection through Las Vegas, and I took a friend with me, and the airfare was $200, $210, and I won $200 in a slot machine in Las Vegas airport and paid it back.
That's
right?
beautiful.
And that's what happens. So if you want to do something, like you want to start a business, go register the LLC or go buy the domain name. We're so often waiting for other things to happen first, but if we start making them happen first, we actually create something that will expand from there. And so back to your original question, which is, if I want to make an affirmation, I am the source, or I am a magical being, we can realize it telepathically, or we can say it. And when we say it, we're just expanding it to the next level, but we don't have to say it in order for it to actually take effect.
Excellent. That answers my question. My next question is about writing the manifesto, which I experienced myself as I was writing the manifesto, which is a whole other, I've done a lot of this sort of like write it down and make it plain sort of thing. And I'm like, yeah. So, but when we started doing this manifesto, it has a different approach to it that's much more, I want to say it's much more sincere and much, it felt so much more personal. And I started to wrote several aspects of it. And then what happened was that it took on a whole new level. It
Hmm.
wasn't just what I wrote. It's just it like expanded in real life. I mean,
Yeah.
and that it wasn't just on the paper anymore. It's like a little movie. You know, it was sort of
Yeah.
on the paper and then it took off on this whole new, not a different direction, but a more expanded direction than I expected.
Yeah. You know, I got this idea, if we want to call it a technique, we can.
Mhm.
I got the idea to do this while conversing with the angels 20 years ago, 20 plus years
Mm.
ago, invited me into that. And how it actually started, or how I discovered it, because I didn't discover it from anyone. I actually allowed it, or somehow or another saw it unfold and realized what was going on. I started writing a book that you would call some people call it a channel book, but I don't see
Mm.
myself as a channel as
Mhm.
much as a telepathic communicator with the angels.
Mhm.
And so I was in the telepathic communication with the angels, and I was writing a book, like my very first parts of writing a book and writing down what it is in an attempt to share it with others. I started noticing that what I was writing down started to actually create this energy movement and started to manifest certain things in my life that I didn't see coming. And so somehow or another, I got this nudge in almost a fully fleshed out form is to go and make a declaration, make
Mm.
a manifesto of certain things. And I remember, like, first of all, one of the things that I manifested was actually, eliminating some credit card debt. And I was a real estate agent at the time. And the first thing that happened was I sold a bunch of houses and paid off all the credit cards. And these things started happening where I would write down what it is that I would see. And what would happen is it started that was going to write down, ooh, well, I want to pay off my house now, right?
Mhm.
Or I
Mhm.
want to do all these bigger things. And all of a sudden it got to this point where it was like all this material stuff. And then I started writing, I want to step into my calling to be able to serve this
Mm.
gift.
Mhm.
And then pretty soon, and at the time I had 3 cars in the driveway anyway, just for me. And I was like, that was too much, right? And it was like, no, it's not this that I want. And it's not to say that we're not meant to manifest form. And I know that not everyone's going to have the ears to hear this yet, and that's okay because there's some that will. When the angels first came to me, they said, you can't create anything. And that means if you want a new car, you can materialize it. But you're going to incrementally take a journey where you'll learn to manifest and consciously create until you get to that point. Just
Mm.
because you can't wiggle your nose and put a Land Rover in your friend's driveway right now, of course, one that doesn't operate on fuel, but just because you can't do that now doesn't mean that at
Mm.
some point in this journey you aren't capable of doing it. And then they said, because you are. And guess
Mhm.
why? Because you created the mountains, you created everything that already is. And so, do you have the capacity to do this? Absolutely. You're just getting to that point incrementally and in sometimes quantum leaping in that. So that's how I experienced this document. And every once in a while, I would be on a journey of some sort and would find that things seemed stagnant or stuck.
Mhm.
I'm like, ooh, I'm going to pull out the big guns because I know what they are. So I would go and take out a piece of paper and I would start writing a manifesto about that particular thing. I would discover what I truly desired. And here's the thing, once you start writing it, it actually doesn't matter that sometimes what will also happen is things that you didn't see coming or didn't realize you could create. All of a sudden, something will happen unexpectedly,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So I remember one time I was writing the document and I was doing it about like my work and things that I wanted to create,
Mhm.
successfully create with my work and things like that. And of course, I was also always grateful for wonderful health, that I feel very alive and feel the energy moving and things like that. And the next thing you know, out of the blue, someone invited me to go on a fantastic trip from which I could say I was upgraded. My life was
Mhm.
changed. And it was a trip to Sedona that I didn't see coming. And it
Mhm.
was an opportunity that came from out of the blue to go to Sedona and do some certain things. And then it was this total shift. But I didn't write down, I want to go to Sedona and I want to do this thing.
Mm.
The minute I decided to flow energy into some of the other things, life was like, ooh, I have a way to upgrade you and calibrate you for this. But not only that, it's going to be this immensely amazing experience. And how I remember it happening, because I had a friend who worked for the airlines in London,
Mm-hmm.
and we would often get together whenever he flew into LA, and he
Mm-hmm.
was flying into Phoenix, and he said, why don't you come out and meet me in Phoenix? And I said, sure. And so it's easy to get to from Southern California. And while we're there, we're like, hey, let's go to Sedona. And the next thing you know, and so I didn't intentionalize that.
Yeah.
The point to the story is that when we do start actually getting into that feeling place of creation, there will be things that we haven't identified that we want to create that will just start showing up in the most magical ways as well.
That's beautiful. Some of our manifestations tend to be very, and this is fine, a bit selfish or self-centered. And I don't mean that necessarily in a derogatory way, because I mean, we are sort of about creating ourselves. Is there also a way to manifest or to calibrate in a creative way that is also of benefit to our planet and to our greater galactic universe?
Yeah. Well, just getting the renewed and refined connection to your higher self
Mm-hmm.
is already enriching the planet in ways that you don't possibly see. And I don't mean this in an egoic way,
Mm-hmm.
but I continually get feedback from people who share with me that somehow or another, something that I did, said, or just my presence has been of benefit to them or a shift. And I never did it on purpose. So I know that being on this journey radiates a certain energy. And when other people sense it, it actually awakens that part in themselves. So, as much as I'd love to manifest $1 million for someone that's broke,
Mm-hmm.
I also know that by going up the evolutionary scale and radiating the energy of who we already are actually does more to benefit anyone who's in poverty consciousness
Mm-hmm.
than if I did or did not manifest that $1 million or $100,000 or $1,000, whatever. And it's not that we can't be generous with it, but it is to understand that the frequency that we're broadcasting in this world from our own evolution is more of a gift to others than we can possibly understand. And I also want to share that we have the ability to co-create beautiful outcomes and miraculous outcomes for other people. And the way that we just
Mm-hmm.
simply do that is we understand that whoever we're perceiving could really use a shift. And we all know what it's like to be in the middle of the fear or difficulty of a shift that we desire, and that fear or difficulty creating resistance to actually having the miracle occur. We can be on the outside and say something like this: I am connected to the source of all things. And I am grateful in advance for Susie healing cancer or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I am grateful in advance to
Mm-hmm.
see this miracle or witness this miracle occurring. I understand that in my form, I can be neutral and channel the golden energy or the intention for Susie or whatever. And that I know she can't, so I don't need to talk to her and tell her how to connect to it.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that this is bringing up and triggering things for her. And the resistance that she has isn't necessarily the block, because I'm bringing in energy from outside. Now, my favorite experience of doing that, oddly, has to do with a friend of mine who had a cat named Magic.
Uh-huh.
And Magic got out and he was lost for a little while. And my friend was very upset because he liked the streets. He was a he was a
Magic
feral
like the
cat.
streets.
He did. He
I'm
was a
having a good
feral.
time.
Yeah, he was a feral cat that I helped a friend of mine rescue as a kitten. And so he liked it out there and he was always trying to get outside. And so she was hopeless because she thought he wouldn't come back.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understood it and I said, I did that. I am connected to the source of life, to the source of all things. And I visualized her, petting magic again. And I thanked the universe in advance, understanding that I am the universe or one with it. And I thanked the universe in advance. And less than a week later, my friend calls me, and this is kind of the caveat of doing that. When you do that, the universe will always make an opportunity for you to know that the miracle has happened. So less than a week later, my friend calls me and she says, "Oh my gosh, magic is back. He's here with me right now." And I said, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I love that." And she says, "Thank you." I'm like,
Ah.
"For what?" Because you don't tell anyone about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "Thank you." And I'm like, "For what?" She goes, "I know that you did something magical to make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as in the ego, didn't, but I, as in the higher self and the unified self, did." But the
Mm-hmm.
cool thing was, it was an opportunity for the universe to show me that somehow or another it did work. And this person knew, I don't know how, that I had done some ritual or something, or in this case was just a release,
Mm-hmm.
that I had played a role in facilitating energy to move into the situation. And again, I don't mean that from an ego place, but it was even more miraculous that my friend actually somehow or another knew that whatever I had faith would work was the thing that worked. And it was beautiful.
It is beautiful. Lucky magic.
Yeah, lucky magic, yeah. And I loved it on a cosmic level that was his name. I mean, I
Right?
literally love that. That is makes the story just even more juicy and
It is.
delicious, right?
It's great. I think that also shows just how much power we as individuals have. So great, magic came back, but it's also that it's that
Magic also, oh, magic.
yeah,
Yeah.
magic always comes back. Exactly. So, I mean, really, just how this whole story is funny because he's this feral cat. He goes outside and then he comes back in and he's the magic. So it feels like that's almost a metaphor for how magical we are as beings.
Yes.
So it's not just about rescuing a cat or calling the cat back in. Smart
Mm-hmm.
cat. But there's even something more powerful we can do. There's something even more powerful with peace or prosperity or safety or whatever these sort of bigger earthly issues are, in addition to our own personal lives or our communities as well.
Mm, yeah. And you said it right there. There is a way, and one of the things that I was reminded, because I have been guided to facilitate awareness around manifestation,
Mm-hmm.
but through a divine portal of the angels.
Right.
And the angels said, I mean, because the weird thing is, because of the way that this world is set up, we usually used to think that angels were religious figures,
Mm-hmm.
and they are not, right? In fact, they are the opposite of that. They're spiritual beings because there's no religion on their side, right? And it's not that they hate religion, it's just that they're beyond and expanded beyond that. The angels reminded me of is the reason why we're bringing this into the equation. They said that manifestation is a heart-centered craft.
Hmm.
It is not a mind-centered craft, it is a heart-centered craft. Well, what is the heart? It is the seat for the indwelling self. And who is the indwelling self? The creator.
Hmm.
And so this is a heart-centered thing. So I know that the most effective way to ignite change on a personal or global level is something heart-centered.
Hmm.
So if we want to initiate a change with someone else,
Mm-hmm.
we don't go to them with angry because we're out of the heart. We go to them from heart, and then we ignite something. So eventually, what we'll do with the constructs that we want to see evolve in an expansive way that serve us all is that we will approach them from a heart-centered space. And technically, the story of David and Goliath is all about the power of the heart-centered self. Because David was a
Hmm.
heart-centered being who was able to take on something that he didn't have the capacity to bring on, but he brought in the divine. He brought in his heart-centered self. And whether that story is true or not, or
Mhm.
whatever it is, we understand the archetype that represents, because David went in with his heart-centered self. Anything that we want to change or shift, by going to the heart, we go
Mm.
to the source of
Mm.
that magic. And that's where it's located. It's not in the mind, you know.
It's not in the will. It's not in my
No,
solar plexus.
no. And it's funny. It's so funny. I went to Lisbon last year in
Hmm.
Portugal,
Hmm.
and there's someone who's on Instagram that has like 800,000 followers, and he has a spiritual center there. And I never heard of him, never heard of his place.
Oh.
And someone said, "Oh, you're in Lisbon. You should go to, ABC place, because
Hmm.
XYZ is this place." And I looked at the Instagram and everything like that. And I was like, "Well, that's very interesting." So I decided to go to an event there, and I felt no heart.
Oh,
I
wow.
felt no activation.
Hmm.
I felt nothing. I didn't
Wow.
feel an activation. But it reminded me, of course, because people are seeking. And so the way that this person speaks is speaking to a group of people who are at an entry level of awakening
I see.
and becoming more and more interested. So there's nothing bad about that.
Hmm.
But I became aware, interesting enough, when I end up in the presence of really, truly powerful healers and those that actually have the opportunity to facilitate some of the best change in us, when I encounter that, it is simply because I can feel that presence. I can feel it radiating from.
That's an interesting experience, really interesting experience. It would be interesting to have a conversation a little bit about the discernment of working in the spiritual community and sort of
Yeah.
understanding what works for you and maybe where you're at. As you said, there's nothing wrong with that sort of introductory experience, but a lot of us have already moved through a lot, have gone through a lot. And
Mhm.
so our hearts are more expanded and more open and more ready for this. And to shift that, whatever dialogue it is that we have about manifestation from the solar plexus, from the mind to the heart, really resonates. At least it resonates personally with me. I would
Yeah.
sense that it would among many in the spiritual community who really feel with their hearts.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be limited to the spiritual community, but I
No.
that's just one place that I'm familiar that
No.
it exists.
Well, like with the retreats that I've been doing, the people that go to them, they go to the next level of creation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not this case where I want everybody at the retreat, come one, come all.
Mm-hmm.
I actually leave that to the universe. And whoever ends up showing up is the person who's ready for the calibration that's available in them. And it's interesting because I do very little to bring those people in. They
Mm-hmm.
all come. And when they do, they don't need a landing page. They don't need a brochure or anything. I tell
Yeah.
them about it and they're like, "Oh no, I'm supposed to be there." It's at the
Yeah.
one in Hawaii. Like I said, 8 of the 12 slots are taken already. And I haven't done any of that brochure or anything. I just have the agenda already finalized. I gave them the agenda, told them that we're doing. They're like, "Oh no, sign me up." Some of them even bought the airline tickets before they told me to sign up. And it was very, very cool. But it is interesting because we are driven by that activation as well. And that activation ultimately is awareness.
Beautiful. I could be in this space with you for the whole day, and explore this even more deeply. I know that in your own work, you continue to expand. People can reach you at the moment through
Right.
Talk to My Angels.
Yeah. Talktomyangels.com, or they can send me an email at Seph, SEP, like Paul H, at talktomyangels.com as well.
Then you are evolving into something new with quantum angel magic. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. I realize that I need to let people know that the work that I do is about manifestation in the angels. So all of this is going to move over to a new brand called Quantum Angel Magic. And it's
Mm-hmm.
a book that I'm writing as well, Quantum Angel Magic as well. And I'm working on a book about my 5 years as a digital nomad.
Okay.
and talking about all the magic that's happened along the way
Mm-hmm.
as well. So there's a lot of different assignments, but it all has to do with calibrating that manifester that's inside you, big bad manifester, and getting that ferocious beast to come out and play. And yeah, so quantumangelmagic.com. But everything's just going to be kind of forwarded over in a seamless way. But that's where we're moving into.
Very cool. I want to shift back to one other thing, and then I know you're going to have to jet, but we received a lot of attention from a few outtakes that I had done on our very first interview way back in 2024, or probably our second interview actually, but it started our 2024 year, and it's gotten a phenomenal amount of attention. What was surprising to me was the actual outtake that I used, which is that in the conversation, we talked about how you had been working with particular angels, perhaps in a session, and then you would go to Starbucks and perhaps see the face of that angel in someone else. So it gave me the sense, the response of that. I mean, we've had hundreds of thousands of viewers of that particular outtake. My sense is that, are we seeing more angels on Earth?
Absolutely. And, it depends on who's ready to hear that.
Hmm.
In that situation where I was in a hypnosis or in a meditation state, and I saw the angel who gave me his name, that was Ivan. And then the next day I went to go grab what I thought was my coffee, and it turns out it was Ivan's. And Ivan walked in and looked just like him. So, it depends on how curious you are about the illusionary nature of this world and life. Could that be someone who looked like Ivan, or could that be Ivan himself? That's the question. And I choose a more powerful and curious perspective. And what I was hit with the knowing of is that that was Ivan that made an appearance in my physicalized world to let me know that he was here. And he's the person who's in charge of assisting me in manifesting resources to serve my mission. So that's a pretty important one too. And that's why that was the case. So for me, it actually was Ivan showing up in the physicalized world. And now I want to cry just thinking about it because of all the energy that he brought. So,
Wow. I mean, that's amazing and beautiful. And
yeah,
you're so fortunate.
we all are. I want to give this to everybody. That's the whole thing, is that when we get there, that's the whole thing. We're watching a greed-based world who's holding on to something that's nothing and wants to hold it from everyone else. We get into this and we start dialing into this. And what's our first motive? I want everyone else to do this. I mean, literally, I can tell you that if it were available to me where I could go to a place and tell people, line up, I'm going to do like ET and touch your finger and download all this for free, I would do it in a second because it is magical and I want everyone to have it. So do you.
I do too. That's part of why we're doing this. And who
That's
knows?
exactly.
You might be able to do that.
Eventually we will.
Yeah.
Love you.
Love you. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see you again.